Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. In this video, I would like to tell you all about the books that I read for this year's Asian Readathon. For folks who are unfamiliar, Asian Readathon is hosted by Cindy of With Cindy, whose channel I will link below, and is a readathon in honor of Asian American, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, which is celebrated in the month of May. This year's readathon had prompts that are inspired by the film Joyride, and there are 5 prompts. So I'm going to timestamp my video based on those prompts and talk about the books that I read for each. But before I get to that, I'll introduce just very, very briefly the kind of parameters of the readathon. I'll also link below a Google Doc which details all of the kind of parameters and ideas and resources for the readathon, and I'll mention as well that Storygraph has some great resources on this as well. There is a challenge created for the readathon, and folks have been adding their books. So if you use Storygraph, you can check out that challenge, and you'll see, this amazing collection of books that people have been adding that satisfy all of these prompts, which is really fun. So the idea with this is to satisfy all 5 prompts. But you don't have to necessarily read 5 books to do so. You might find a book that kind of meets the spirit of multiple prompts, so you could complete it with fewer than 5 books. And the kind of twist, I suppose, on this is that every book that you read for the readathon and that you count towards any of the prompts for the readathon should be by a author or feature a character of a different Asian ethnicity, in honor of the fact that Asia is, of course, very diverse, and to avoid reading non-diversely within this readathon. So I ended up reading 4 books to satisfy the 5 prompts. And I read books by authors who, in the order that I'm going to talk about them, are of Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Indian, and Taiwanese backgrounds, respectively. And somehow I ended up with 3 books out of the 4 having Jin in them. That wasn't something that I planned on. I kind of picked books as I went throughout the month rather than making a firm TBR at the beginning. So that just kind of happened based on what I had on my Kindle. And I'm fine with it. So there are 5 prompts without further ado. And I'll just explain with the first prompt why it is that I ended up only reading 4 books rather than 5. The first prompt for Asian Readathon 2023 is to read a book written by an Asian author. Now, for me, for Asian Readathon, every book that I choose would satisfy this prompt. So I didn't pick one book specifically to satisfy only this prompt because that didn't really make any sense to me. I picked books to try to meet the other 4 prompts, knowing that all 4 of those books would meet this prompt as well. Since for me, a big part of Asian Readathon is discovering and reading work by all different Asian authors working in different genres, and so any book that I read is going to be from an Asian author for this readathon. So that's the first prompt. I read 4 books for it. Now, the second prompt is to read a book featuring a friendship between at least 2 Asian characters. And I read, I think, a couple of the 4 books that I read for this month, for this readathon, could have probably fit into this particular prompt. But for a friendship between at least 2 Asian characters, the book I want to share, and I'll try to put a picture of the books up here since I read on ebook, is The Gurkha and the Lord of Tuesday by Saad Zed Hossein. And this is a book that I found to be very funny. It's a short novella kind of length. And, the Gurkha and the Lord of Tuesday refers to 2 characters in the book. And the book is very much following the relationship between these 2. I think, to use the word friendship to kind of sum up that relationship is maybe not quite the first word that would come to mind. But certainly, in the book there are an array of characters And, their relationships include, but are not limited to, friendships. There are, of course, other kinds of relationships as well. And the two title characters refer to Ban Gurung, who is a former soldier, and Malek Amar, who is a jinn who has been imprisoned and has been asleep, imprisoned in this kind of stone mountain prison, we'll say, who wakes up at the beginning of the book. So it's not a spoiler because it happens right away. The slow erosion of water and time releases Malek Amar from his sleep. And it's set in Kathmandu, a futuristic kind of Kathmandu, which is ruled by capital K Karma, which is an AI that kind of rules the city based strictly on algorithms and probabilities and calculations. And there is certainly a very strong kind of dystopian aspect to that. And so Malek Amar, who's this jinn, wakes up at the beginning, and is wondering where his worshippers are, where all the people are who would be acknowledging him, and decides to kind of go down to Kathmandu and take over the city, in effect, and meets the other titular character on the way, and total chaos ensues. This is a book that is hard to explain without giving massive spoilers, but this book goes in, I don't even know what I was expecting with this book. It's very funny, laugh out loud funny, I thought, and I'm definitely going to read the follow-up book to this. It deals with certainly themes of kind of AI and the threats posed by that, but also deals with kind of various kinds of political questions as well, and in a funny way. Like, chaos ensues. That is, the jinn arrives in the city and chaos ensues. That is what I can tell you about this book. I would encourage you to check it out. I really enjoyed it. I had never read Sadzi Hussein before, but I know he has other books, including another one kind of related to this one. And on the basis of The Gurkha and the Lord of Tuesday, I can't wait to check out more. The second prompt is to read a book written by an Asian author and or featuring an Asian character, or both, and featuring an Asian character that is focused on identity and self-discovery. And again, I think maybe, at least two of the books I think that I read could probably fall under this category, but for a book focused on identity and self-discovery, I chose The Pauper Prince and the Eucalyptus Jinn by Usman Malik. Again, somehow I ended up with the jinn theme. And this book is beautiful. I loved The Pauper Prince and the Eucalyptus Jinn. And I had read Usman Malik before in kind of short story context, but this is a novella as well. And it follows a young man who's Pakistani American. And in the book, his grandfather passes away, and he finds some different items amongst the grandfather's effects. And, without giving, again, too many spoilers, this leads to him traveling to Lahore and to exploring his grandfather's background and exploring kind of the relationships between these kind of different stories that his grandfather would tell about a princess and a jinn, and his own grandfather's early life before he came to America. And this book has aspects of mythology and kind of supernatural aspects, and it really gets into some kind of cosmic scope type of questions about the nature of the universe in particular kind of ways. Some real kind of philosophical questions addressed quite explicitly in this book, actually, which I really enjoyed. But it's really, I think, at its heart about the main character's exploration of his identity and self-discovery as the prompt. specifies, looking at his lineage and his ancestry and his relationship with his grandparents and his family history. And, you know, there are these kind of other kind of mythological aspects woven throughout that story. But I think really at its heart, it is this kind of identity related exploration. And I enjoyed this so much. I loved this book and I would recommend it wholeheartedly. And I am going to, of course, be reading more by the author as well. I have liked everything by Usman Malik that I've read. The third prompt is to read a book by an Asian author and or featuring an Asian character. And again, I went with both here, an Asian author and featuring Asian characters, that shows them going on an adventure. There are definitely a few that I read. The Gurkha and Lord of Tuesday could be an adventure book too, but for this one, I read a advanced copy, thank you NetGalley, of The Jinn Bot of Shantiport by Samit Basu. Again, Jinn theme. This is the third one in a row, and I had already had this ebook ARC requested before, and I had already had it sitting on my Kindle, ready to read. And so when I saw that it fit one of the prompts for this, perfect. What a better time to read that. And The Jinn Bot of Shantiport is described as being kind of a take on or interpretation of Aladdin in a futuristic kind of a setting. I do think that it veers very far away from that source material though. And I think, I can't remember if it was an article or an interview that I read, like the author says as much, that this was kind of the original inspiration and then it has become something else. But there's absolutely a lamp involved. There are absolutely 3 wishes or perhaps more involved in The Jinn Bot of Shantiport. And it's set in this fictionalized city. And, the people believe that the city is doomed, in effect. The book deals with resistance to colonialism. It deals with class relations and challenging hierarchical class relations and exploitative class relations. It also deals with the potential rights of bots. One of the characters in the book is how would I describe him? He is described as a bot in the book. There are kind of human genetic components involved. But there is this kind of theme of humans and bots living alongside each other and being family, right? And what that looks like and what that could look like in terms of distribution of political rights and social rights. And it's very much an adventure story, so that's why it fits with this prompt. The characters, broadly speaking, are on an adventure to really overthrow major aspects of status quo social relations in the city in which they live and to save the city in the process. And in the process, there's lots of political strategizing. There's huge kind of robotic battles. There's, lots of kind of sneaking through dark passageways. It is an adventure story, absolutely. And this was really fun. And I think that the relationship between kind of the 3 main characters in a lot of ways is what makes this book so fun. There are some really funny laugh out loud lines for sure. The narrator is a piece of sentient technology that seems to be from another planet, and that gives a very particular sort of angle in terms of the narration, because the narrator has different levels of access to the kind of knowledge of different characters. And so this is an interesting component of this story. And I enjoyed this one too. I had a really good reading month. I enjoyed this one as well. There were some big twists actually that I didn't expect, which I always enjoy in an adventure story like this one. Finally, the last prompt is read a book featuring an Asian character who is either a hot mess, famous, or eccentric. So this is a hard one actually, because first of all, you have to kind of define hot mess if that's the one you're going with, right? As well as eccentric. Famous is maybe a little more obvious. But this is kind of hard to know if a book would satisfy this prompt without reading the book first, I think. I feel like it's a lot easier to figure out from looking at a book whether it's going to be an adventure story or whether it might include a friendship between two Asian characters than it is to figure out who's a hot mess just from the kind of book jacket description, right? So that was something. But I ended up picking a book that worked exactly for this, which was Bitter Medicine by Mia Sai. And I really enjoyed this book. And the reason that I feel that this book satisfies the prompt of having an Asian character who is a hot mess, famous, or eccentric is because the main character in this book, whose name is Elle, actually describes herself in these terms, which I didn't know when I picked the book. I'd kind of picked the book thinking that probably there would be a friendship between two Asian characters in it, and that's where it would land in the prompt, but I'm just reading off my screen here. The character Elle describes herself, quote, "Now I'm just a weird hot mess who can't fit in anywhere, ... And I've deleted the latter part of that sentence to avoid what would have been a spoiler. So the fact that she's described herself as a hot mess means that I am willing to put the book in that category and say this is what I'm using for this prompt. This is a fantasy romance book, which puts it a little bit outside of my usual fantasy and sci-fi reading. The description of this book includes that it follows a Chinese immortal and a French elf navigating romance, family loyalty, and workplace demands. And Elle, the character, is the immortal in question. And the other main character is this French elf. And this book has some steamy scenes, I will say. Oh my goodness. I really liked this book. It was not exactly quite what I expected, and I don't generally read romance novels. It's just not my thing. And I would say that this book very much is equal parts fantasy and romance. So I think that somebody who is a romance reader predominantly, and again, I don't read romance novels, so I'm kind of guessing. Somebody who's a romance reader who doesn't read fantasy much but is maybe interested in what reading fantasy would be like, I think could be really into this book. And I think a fantasy reader who maybe doesn't usually read romance but is like open to that would also enjoy what this book has to offer. And it definitely very much deals with this kind of themes of family loyalty and identity in relationship to the kind of expectations of one's parents or of one's coworkers or professional obligations that one might have in really kind of complicated and nuanced ways. I really, really appreciated the character development in this book. And this is the first Mia Sai work that I've ever read. I believe it may even be a debut. Wonderful. I really, really enjoyed this as well. So I had a fabulous reading month. That was my 4 picks for Asian Readathon. If you read something fabulous for Asian Readathon, please let me know in the comments. I love a suggestion. If you've read any of these books and would like to share your thoughts, or anything by these authors and you would like to share your thoughts, please do in the comments. I love chatting about books, obviously, Aquamarine 18 Tarot and books. Thank you so much for stopping by and for chatting books with me. I will see you all again soon.